Velkommen. At det er ok, jeg gør det på dansk, min velkomst. Det håber jeg. Jeg skal tale langsomt og tydeligt. Det er godt at se jer. Dejligt, at vi kunne få så mange mennesker samlet på ret kort tid. Fik vi sat den her træning på plads. Fik sat det sammen. Så super godt at se jer. Jeg ved også, der kommer nogen, så om ikke så længe, så vil der støde lidt flere mennesker til. For dem af jer, som ikke kender mig, så er mit navn Mona Nybo Grøn, og jeg er General Manager for NSA Nordic i Danmark. Det er også der sørger for, at jeres glade kunder i Danmark, Norge, Sverige og Finland får Just Plus tilsendt. Så det er en velkommen til jeres information, så bliver det videooptaget. Vi har vores helt egen videotekniker på plads derovre i hjørnet i dag. Så vi har en mulighed for efterfølgende her at kan gense den her træning. Og lige så vel mødet senere vil også blive videooptaget. Så I har det til glæde og gavn langt ud i fremtiden, kan man sige. Pleasure to introduce the speaker of this training, Gordon Hester. Very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Gordon has more than 25 years of experience with business analysis and business coaching, and he will share with you today how do you build even faster, even better businesses. Yeah, well, very warm welcome, Gordon Hester.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Just before you start,
yes.
I just want to welcome also Wim Plange, because yeah, you can get up.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Absolutely.
Wim has one of the biggest European teams with more than 25,000 distributors in all over the world, really. It's a big pleasure to have you here as well. You'll be listening to Wim a bit later, but this time it's Gordon's.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for coming out. Certainly is a pleasure to be here today. I love having a small crowd because we can be interactive, so I get to talk and I can take questions, and I'm here for one purpose, and that's to help all of you understand how to build this into a big, large, successful business. Am I in the right crowd? Is that what everybody's interested in doing with their Juice Plus business? Okay, excellent. And of course, I want to also acknowledge Wim. Wim's been traveling with me all week, and Wim is clearly Jeff's biggest leader in all of Europe. I don't think that Europe would be Europe without Wim and Birgit and all the work they've put in. We've had a great time training this week, and I will encourage you, if you have specific questions on your distributorship, you will not meet anybody that is better to ask to answer those questions than to Wim. So he's here, and he's also going to be just a good thing to take a note here. He's also leaving at about 5 o'clock out of the training, not because he's going anywhere, except that he has a meeting with a new prospect from Israel. So Wim, as successful as he is, shows good leadership in that he's always working, always building a new team. He was the one that went in and opened Israel. He was the one that took the initiative and went down there. And to his credit, it has now become the fastest growing country that we've ever opened with NSA. And he's got his first NMD in 4 months. Just to give you some perspective. Matter of fact, I have to tell you the story. When they started their business, and they had their first meeting on January the 31st, and it was a one-day month. So I didn't really kind of expect much. Come on, one day for the whole month, how much volume is there going to be? And they had this massive grand opening, and I had Sean Hopkins, who works for the company, send me the downline printout, the organizational printout of 2 of the leaders, two of the top people. And I got their printouts, and I was like, I wonder if they sent me the right thing, because these printouts literally had organizations going down into 5 generations from day 1 in the business. Like, it was just an amazing thing. And of course, they just continue to do better and better. They're going to have more NMDs coming out, and I think it's going to be a great country, and Wim deserves a lot of the credit. We wouldn't be there without him. So why am I here today? As I said, I want to help you all grow. I know you're all distributors at different levels in the business. Maybe a little bit of background on myself, kind of what I've been a part of, why I have a pretty good understanding of this business. I've been working and building Jeff Roberti's Juice Plus business now for 24 years. And just to give you a perspective of what Jeff's business looks like, it's a pretty good business. You know, he has earned about 65 million euros as a distributor with NSA. Last year was his biggest year, and whether he's working or not, you know, has an income of a little over 250,000 euros a month. So, anybody want a business like that? Yes, this is what we call a high quality problem in business. And if you look at the structure of his business, this all didn't happen because he built one great leader. You know, Jeff has 26 frontline PB and POB lines. They are spread all over the world. He's literally the #1 distributor in every market that NSA has. And to give you an idea of the size of his organization, over 3,000 qualifiers, but almost half of his entire organization is below his PB5. So I did a calculation the other day. It was sort of amazing. We took the organizational volume and figured it out. And Jeff's organization is well over half of the entire sales volume for NSA. So I share this with you because I want you to understand that what I'm telling you today, you might never have been taught. We find that it's not taught much. But this is the foundations of what we've done to create those results. You know, we went about things a little bit differently. We understood the business in a very simple way. We understood how the business worked. And by applying those things, these simple concepts and principles, we were able to create these results. And to be honest with you, I'm always sort of amazed when I go around teaching that most people don't understand these business basics, you know, really how to build this business. So on that note, I will ask you a question. What is this business? What is the secret to this business? If you were going to tell me one thing that this business is about, what would that one thing be? Relationships, okay. I like that. We have we believe in the power of relationships and that long-term relationships equal long-term success. And, okay, we'll come right back to that one. That's okay. So the relationships are important. And the interesting thing is, if I said to everybody, great, now tell me how relationships work. Let's map it out on the board. You would be amazed how many people just sit and stare at me. They have an entire life of operations with relationships, but they've never really thought about that question. Certainly that's a big part of it. The second was duplication. Yes, duplication is important because this is part of building the team. Well, we realized that this business was really about two things. The first was we understood the business we were in. And that business was we were in the transformation business. See, we understood at the end of the day that the reason we kept people was we continued to transform their lives. That if we couldn't make people grow within the context of being part of this business, however that was for them, whatever that picture was, they would go somewhere else. So this is a business where transforming people is the foundation of this business. And then we began to realize the other important factor was, well, how does that work? You know, did we notice anything along the journey? And we noticed one critical thing. And that was no matter who had success and who had failure, the only difference between success and failure was consistent discipline. And we realized that if people had consistent discipline over time, they produce results. And the results can look different. Some big, some not so big, some fast, some slow. But we realized the key to discipline, this consistent discipline, was engagement. And this is what we began to build on. That at the end of the day, this is a business of engagement. And what you have to understand is that if you can keep a customer on the product and you can keep a distributor on your team, then you can build this business into anything you want. And if you look at the important struggles that people go through, what you begin to understand is the most difficult part of this business is mastering engagement. Keeping a customer on a product or keeping a distributor consistently working the business and consistently building the business, consistently growing in the business so that they can transform. If you think about it, transformation is a process. It's never an event. So we looked at engagement and said, listen, we have to master engagement. We have to be able to keep people involved. And if we can, everything good happens. And then, of course, we also understood at the end goal, which kind of brings me to this picture, understanding the game. I gave you a picture of the business chart. we understood that the end goal for us in this business was to build critical mass. And critical mass goes back to relationships, but one more important word. It wasn't just relationships, it was independent relationships. See, our goal was to build people to a point where they could succeed without us. And we set that up as an expectation from day one. And I will tell you by far, the number one leadership challenge I see is that people build teams but do not build independent leaders. And I can always tell it because they're the ones that always become overwhelmed. They're always stuck because they're always a part of somebody's business. And as I told you, right now, Jeff's 26 PB and POB lines, if they never called him, if they never talked to him again, their business would continue to grow because he built them into independent leaders. One of the things that we always told people when we started is that our gift to you is the gift of independence. That our goal is to teach you how to succeed without us, to help you grow. And we understood, I don't care who it is, when they come in, they could be the greatest business mind in the world. For this business to grow, they have to grow. So a lot of what we got into was that transformation became not only a business journey, but a journey in personal growth. You know, that we had to help people get better at things and change their mindset about things. And we continue to do this every day, whether it's with new people or literally the owners of this company. Because the other role that I get to play is not only do I get to work building Jeff's business, but I also work as a consultant for the company. So I'm dealing with all these mindset issues and changes and company transformations all the time. So when we talk about this, let's walk through how we build this business. Now, what's the goal? Independence, independent relationships. Critical mass means lots of them. What comes with that? Things like time freedom, things like financial freedom, things like the ability to succeed no matter where you go and no matter what you do. This is the picture of what we're trying to get to. But how do we get there? How does this game work? And of course, if you look at the chart, the first stage of the business is prospecting. What I will tell you is that prospecting is a part of this business that never ends. Never ends. Every day, if you were to talk to Jeff, he is out talking to people about the business and about the product. Matter of fact, I have to tell you, he talks so much about the product, there are times that he drives me crazy. Literally, I have to share a story just to give you a perspective. We were having a meeting in Memphis with Jay Martin and Paulo Teixeira and Randy Matthews, and Jay and Paulo pretty much run the operation. Jay was the founder, Randy is the senior sales guy, and so this is an important group, and we're having an important meeting. And I noticed all of a sudden that Jeff's not paying any attention, and he's talking to the waiter. And he's just sitting there, keeps talking to the waiter, and I'm like, okay, man, we're kind of in a meeting here, and we're having an important talk, and he's talking to the waiter, and then I see him giving the waiter his card. And afterwards, I talked to him, and I said, man, what were you up to? We're sitting here having a meeting? He's like, I recruited him. He's coming to the meeting tonight. and that's Jeff, and he continues to do that. You can take somebody, one of Vim's frontline people, Nordic guy, Magnus Helsen. You guys know Magnus? Magnus literally met Jeff walking through a bar. And if you've heard the story, Jeff was having, I don't know if this is a good part of the story, but Jeff was having a tequila at the bar, and Magnus walks by. Jeff says, let me have another. Magnus says, give me one too. And they sit down and they start talking. And they begin to build a friendship. And Jeff became really good at prospecting because of one reason. It wasn't that he did it all the time. He always does. He loves to talk to people about the business. But he connects before he sells. And this is such an important principle. I deal with so many people that struggle at prospecting because they do not understand that the first victory you have to have in recruiting is to have somebody want a relationship with you, not with your product and not with your opportunity. So Magnus is a good example. Jeff didn't sit there and 2 minutes into it start talking to him about the business. He actually became friends with him, and the way Magnus found out about the business was Jeff had given the gummies, the Chewies, you have them here, to Tony Robbins' wife, and they were at an event somewhere, and she was eating them, and Magnus was hungry and gave her, she gave him the gummies, and he's like, what in the world is this? This is great. She goes, oh, that's what Jeff sells. And that became the journey. But he would have not had that success, and he would have not had the successes of the Lauren Slocums and the Chris Strobes and all these people that he continues to recruit. It's like everybody says, how come every time Jeff recruits somebody, they become a huge leader? Because Jeff attracts good people and Jeff connects before he sells. He actually takes time to understand what people want, what their needs are, and what the fit is, and then he begins to build stories around that. So how do we connect to people? What do you think the secret of that is? If I asked you, yes? Questions. Okay, so if we're going to connect to people, I agree, questions. What is the goal of the questions?
To build trust, because people
okay.
like to talk about themselves.
Yes, trust is good. I like that. Anybody else? Okay, so this is an important thing to understand, that connection is about three things: trust, care, and help. So at the end of the day, what we realized is if we wanted to win the first victory, somebody wanting a relationship with us, what we had to do, and we use a lot of questions, and of course there's other techniques, but questions is number one. We are looking for them to come to the conclusion, you know what, this is somebody that we can trust. And I will tell you that using questions is the best way to overcome this. Because if I don't use questions and I start right into a sales pitch, what do you think happens a lot of times? People come to the conclusion, wow, this person's only here talking to me and looking to sell me, and you begin to actually erode trust away. So we very seldom ever just start off pitching about things. We will always try to connect through questions. Of course, the second thing we want to do is we want to ask questions where people come to the conclusion in their interaction with us that, you know what, this is somebody that actually cares about me. And then ultimately, we're then going to build conversation around how we build a relationship, what we have to offer them, how we can help them transform their life. And I will tell you, if you do nothing else but change your communication pattern, and you begin to understand that connection becomes before anything, and you master connection, your entire business will change. And I have to give you an example of this because I believe one of the best examples Jeff's have in leadership of this principle is Vim. I've traveled with Vim, and Jeff and I, we chat about all the leaders, and he says, so what is it about Vim do you think that makes Vim so successful? He's a hard worker, but you know what? There's lots of hard workers in here. And we talked about it, and I said, Jeff, I look at it and I said, Vim to me is a guy that has mastered connection. You can't help but to spend time with Vim and not like Vim and not understand that Vim really cares about people, and this is who he is as a person. And you see it in everything he does, in all his words and all his actions. And because of this, people are attracted to him. And then, of course, once they're attracted, why does he have a great team? Because it's not just about attracting them. Then he goes to work, and he knows, he operates with the mentality of changing people's lives. And when he does that, his business becomes successful. So you have to continue to master connection. And yes, questions is a great way to do it. I literally get on calls with people. I'll do a three-way call. I have to always clarify that point. I'll do a three-way call with people about once a month. Somebody will call me, and it's always, oh, we have this really big business contact, and they need to talk to a really successful business person. And here's what I need you to tell them. And then they give me this entire script about the company and about the opportunity. And I was like, I appreciate the information. I kind of chuckled to myself. And I begin to have a conversation with this person when we have a talk. And all the questions are about them. What I'm trying to figure out is, what are their needs? What am I competing against? Why are they even on the phone? What are their interests? Because if I understand these things, then I can begin to shape the conversation around how this opportunity and this product can begin to make a difference in their life. And it's funny how you can take the littlest thing, when you get good at paying attention to this, and you'll pick up things that you'd never pick up until you begin to pay attention to this part. I had a call recently, I might have shared this story in Munich, with a girl in North Carolina who wanted to get her dad on the phone, or wanted to get her dad in her business. Her dad was a very successful financial planner, and she gets her dad on the phone with me, and she said, you'll connect great with my dad. He's so much like you. And I get the dad on the phone, and he's like, not really sure why I'm on the phone. And I could tell that she didn't prep him. He didn't know why he was on the phone. He was already irritated before the call got started, and I was like, yikes, now what? And I said, you know, I'm on the phone because I think you have a loving daughter who has a dream of having a business with her father. So I was trying to connect, and then and he made it very clear to me, he goes, you know what? I know I have a loving daughter, but I have no interest in her business. She works so hard, I so don't want to work like that. So it was a picture of the business that was the problem. And then I was like, now what? Now I'm 3 minutes into the call, and this guy's mad, and he doesn't want to be on the phone, and I got the daughter looking for help. And I got into a conversation with him about, well, what does interest you? You know, what do you enjoy doing? You know, your daughter said you were really successful. And in the conversation, he told me two things. He told me about his love for kids, and he told me about his patriotism and his love to help the soldiers and the people that come back from the wars. And these are things that when he talked about it, you could just hear him light up. This is part of who he was. This is part of what he really believes in. So I called her back after the call, and at the end of the class, you know what, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and although I don't have anything to say other than I really enjoyed the call, and I hope to meet you in person sometime, and that was the end of the call. No sales pitch, no anything. So I called the girl back, and I said, so what did you get out of the call? And she goes, that my dad doesn't want to be in the business. Anything else? Not one thing. I said, well, that is kind of crazy because I have a page and a half of notes about our conversation. And the only reason she didn't and I did was because I was paying attention to the conversation. And I told her, you want to understand how to get your dad in the business? Get him involved with your business, helping kids. Get him involved with your business, helping work with the Army, with the armed forces. And watch how he lights up and watch how he makes a home in this business. And she made that connection and began doing those things with her father. And now her father is giving her leads all the time in her business. So it's important to pay attention to where hope is and what lights people up, and then to build the story around that. So is everybody clear on the importance of connection? Okay, so the next thing that I want to tell you about prospecting is that, well, I have a lot of people that struggle at prospecting. And one of the reasons they struggle is because they don't have a lot of success. So they'll do their memory joggers. I don't know if you call them memory joggers over here? Name lists. And they'll go out and they'll talk to people, and they become very frustrated. You know, they don't get results. And what is the answer that we give them when they don't get results? Go talk to more people. So I always thought this was a crazy strategy that, look, you come to me and you say, I'm really not successful at doing something, and my answer is, great, do it more. It just never made any sense to me. So we understood that part of prospecting was not so much quantity as much as quality. So we want to teach people how to successfully prospect. We needed to teach people how to connect. We need to teach people the art of storytelling, because then we run into an important part of the engagement formula, and it's experiences. So if you look at the top of the page, I'm going to keep coming back to this. What is engagement? We put engagement into a formula. That engagement is the triumph of hope over experience. So here's what we found out, and it's really simple. That every day of our lives, when we live, our brain is innately making conclusions about things. And it either makes these conclusions and it begins to form a pattern of thinking. It begins to they call it neuroplasticity, begins to form how your brain thinks, or it sort of discards things. It ignores things. It all is about the focus of your brain. And these experiences become important because they become the program of your brain, and therefore they become what controls every decision you make and every action you take. So we understood as we studied the business, the number one reason people quit the business was because the meaning they gave to an experience. See, they might have been one of those people that we said, oh, go talk to 10 people. And somewhere in that process, they said, you know what? I can't do this. And they formed a belief. And once that belief was formed, depending how strong it is, then we have a problem. And that problem is they're going to disengage because they've already told themselves something that is counterproductive. They have created a bad experience. So if we go back to how does this work in the business, let's go back to our example of prospecting and talking to people. Imagine if Vim and I are out and we're building the same business. And Vim, who is awesome at the business, great at prospecting, talks to 2 people in a month and he gets 1. And maybe I'm not as good as Vim, so I got 1 person by talking to 10 people. What's our business look like? Well, last time I looked, we both have 1 person, same business. Except there's a huge difference in the story. Vim is dealing with 1 bad experience, and I'm dealing with 9. So we understood that the goal was quantity and quality. And what we taught was quality. What we taught was the basics of communication, the basics of connection before you start using information, and then we understood the basics of storytelling. Because at the end of the day, if you look at why people get involved and what the second part of the communication process is, it's so much about storytelling. So let's talk a little bit about storytelling. Who can tell me what the purpose of a story is? You guys use stories in your business. You use stories in your life. Does anybody in here think that stories aren't important? Yes, they're hugely important. Yes?
Others can relate to it.
Okay, they can relate to it. Okay. Anybody else? Who thinks they know the purpose of a story?
You want to illustrate something.
Illustrate? Okay. Illustrate. I-L. Okay. What else? What's the purpose of a story? Use them every day. Use them your whole life.
Listen.
Okay. Stories to listen. Okay. Learn. Learn. Engage.
Sell. If you have something to
Sell. Okay.
To understand.
To understand.
A purpose. Interesting. A story needs to have a purpose.
A purpose. Okay. And to entertain. So I think these are all interesting points, but they're not the answer that I'm looking for. This is something worth discussing. Every story is to drive a process, and that process is to fulfill an outcome, a purpose. Every story has a purpose. There's a reason you're telling it. But what makes the story work? What makes the process work? And there is engagement, but there is one word, and that word is curiosity. There was a huge study done on this. There's an area of psychology called narratives now. Storytelling has become a huge part of business. Matter of fact, there was a study done in the US where they anticipate the art of storytelling affects 1/4 of our entire GDP. Just to give you an understanding of how important this is. I wrote an article about the neuroscience, so that the science of the brain around narratives about 1.5 years ago, and I had the company contact me from this article. They found it on the internet, and they are a huge, largest PR firm in the world. And they called and they said, you know what, we want to talk with you because all of our clients, their clients are like Pepsi and Nestle and the London Olympics, big clients. All of them understand the importance of storytelling and narratives, but they're not figuring out how to be effective at using them. They don't have any answers. And of course, this company gets paid to provide answers, and they have all this research and they're doing everything. We just can't figure it out. So maybe Gordon Hester has it figured out because he wrote a science article about narratives. And it was really interesting because when I had the call with him, there were 7 people on that phone, including one of the ladies was one of the 6 people that run this global company. And I figured I'm never going to have an opportunity in my life to sit down with this kind of talent. And I got on the call and I had a notepad. And all I was going to do was take notes and learn. And the only thing that I learned is they had no idea how narratives worked. They had no idea how narratives relate to human behavior. And we began to talk about parts of it, and the call became literally an hour-long training about how narratives work. So the first thing I explained is curiosity. There was a scientist that studied this, and he said, what happens with our brain is what we focus on is what we become curious about. So if we don't learn to tell a story that gets somebody curious, then what happens is the process of storytelling doesn't work. And I always tell people, if your stories aren't working, go back and ask yourself the question, why aren't people curious about what you're saying? What are you missing in your communication where people don't want to hear anymore, where they shut off to the process? We understand that in sales, they tell you the fifth interaction is your most successful time in sales. So if that's true, then I have to use stories long enough to begin to create enough curiosity for me to get the outcome, the purpose that I want. A sale of our product, or a sale of getting somebody to be on our team. So we were always about paying attention to curiosity. We always understood this was the goal. Sometimes it was a statement, sometimes it was a story. And what we teach people is the craziest thing. We teach everybody to do their product and business story. This is one of the first things, and I think it's really important. What we don't teach people is the power of collecting stories. So one of the things that we began to do was we collected every story we could get. Every story that we thought we could use as a tool to share with somebody when we thought that story was necessary to create curiosity. I can't tell you how many times I've used Vim's story. And the more I learned about it, the more I learned about people, the more I use their stories all the time. And I will tell you, the most powerful stories are the ones that people feel. So we collect stories that people feel because we know these are the stories that are going to light up people's brains to make that curiosity grow even more. And we have so much transformational type of stories. So, you know, I can give you an example. We go and we look at like the NMD speeches. Have you all heard them at the conferences? And it would be interesting if I said, well, you've heard them, well, tell me about one. And people don't really remember them. And then maybe there's one or two that really stick out in your brain. And I will tell you, I think it's now the 47 large conferences. So I've been around and heard a lot of NMD speeches. And to this day, there is one NMD speech that still sticks out of my brain. And it was an NMD speech with Karen Quirk. You might not know Karen, you might know Karen. Karen's an NMD out of Chicago. And Karen shared her story about why she's in Juice Plus. And the only picture she put up was her daughter. And her daughter died at 22 years old of cystic fibrosis. And she talked about how her daughter got 8 more years of life and how it made a difference and how she had her involved in the business and how it strengthened their bond and how she saw her go away and how she was so committed to make sure that every child had good health. And you're like, I mean, everybody in the crowd just bawling. It's hard for me to tell the story and not be emotional about it. And I will tell you, it's these kind of stories that you want to collect and share. It's these kind of stories that make a difference, because ultimately, it's an important thing to understand. For people to change, something has to happen. For people to really get committed, for the engagement to work, something that has to happen. So what is that something? And I'll ask you this question. Why don't people change? You know, we're looking for transformation. We get all these people that sign up on a product in the business. We know that they have to grow. Why don't they change? What do you think the answer is? Why do you think people don't change?
Fear.
What was the answer?
Fear.
Fear. Fear is a good answer. Are you ready? People do not change their lives because they are addicted to their emotional state. Because they are addicted to their emotional state. And what we know is for people to truly change, for people to get committed to transformation, that we have to create an emotional feeling, a feeling of pain or a feeling of pleasure, that is so great they will commit to the process necessary to change. And it's an amazing thing with the power of the brain wanting to keep things the same. We see people all the time that come to these wonderful Juice Plus wellness lectures, and getting people on the product is no problem. We see it all the time, and they hear all the studies and they see all this, and then 2 boxes later they're out of the business, and you're like, what happened? And the simple fact was they went back to their regular thinking. They didn't connect to the transformation that this product can make, and because of that, it's out of sight, out of mind. Did the product work? Of course it works. All the science says it works. But they didn't make enough of a connection. They didn't get an emotional connection where they were willing to stay on the product and let it transform their life. So we collect stories, and we understand the power of a story is about building curiosity, and the more we build feeling into that, the more powerful that story is going to be. So the second thing that I will ask you is, what's another important outcome with stories? You know, what do we have to accomplish? What do you think is what else is important about stories?
Passion.
I'm sorry?
Passion.
Passion. I like passion. Passion's important. We're going to talk about delivery in a minute.
Trust.
Trust. Are you ready? Write these words down. Make me care. Kim, good luck. Make me care. This was such a huge takeaway for us on stories. And I heard this story, this came up to me, the understanding of this, of all things, listening to a lecture by the director of the guy who did the Toy Story. I don't know if you remember the Toy Story. And he said every time he made a film, he understood that the goal was to make the audience care, that everybody sitting in their seat was like, why am I watching this? Make me care. And I think this is important to understand because ultimately everybody sitting in front of you is thinking the same thing. Make me care. What do you think drives curiosity? Somebody caring enough that they're curious about it to move forward. So every time we tell a story, we have make me care in the back of our minds. And I will tell you the craziest place I see this broken in the NSA business is with the business story. I go and I hear people talk about the business, and you know what I hear them talking about? A 45-minute presentation, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, about the history of NSA. Talk about the 42 years and the smoke detectors and the water filters. And I sit there and think, I wonder why they do that. I wonder if they realize there's an entire audience of people who really don't care about our past. What they care about is our future and how it's going to impact their life. There's a reason 4 years after I introduced that capitalizing on the wellness movement that I'm the person that everybody still wants to tell the business story. Is it because other people can't tell a business story? Of course people can tell a business story. The difference is that I don't talk about the past much. I talk all about the future. I talk about hope. And I talk about why this is a good home for it. And I do it in a way where people are not only curious, but they want to be a part of something. So I understand that one of the purposes of curiosity, one of the purposes of storytelling is to direct hope. So if we go back to our engagement principle, what do we know? The triumph of hope over experience, that if we can't make experience work, the only thing that can drive engagement is hope. If we don't know how to create hope in our stories, in our communications, in our action, ultimately people will disengage. What we know from psychology is where hope is the strongest, discipline and energy flow. So if I build somebody's hope in the business and the product so strong, what I will tell you is they will overcome any experience and stay engaged in this business. You know, kind of a good way to understand the power of this, there's an area, if you want to study this, called optimism bias, an area of psychology. And here's what it says, that when hope's strong, it'll overcome experiences. And the example they give, that is such a great example, is the example of a student. So if I'm a student at a university taking a test, and I have a high optimism bias, you know, I have a lot of hope and confidence in myself, and I take a test and I fail the test, what I'm likely to say is something like this: I didn't fail the test was poorly written. So I totally discount the experience because I have so much hope and belief in myself that I continue to go forward because of that. I could have the exact opposite of the same situation with a person that doesn't have a high optimism bias, and if they got a perfect score on that test, what I would likely hear is, had to be a fluke. I'm not even sure the teacher graded the right paper, because there's no way I could do this. I know if I took it again, I'd fail it for sure. Because this is the way we think. Now, I'll give you a little question, a little trivia question. What percentage of the population do you think operate with an optimism bias, that have hope as a big part of their thinking? Think it's a big percentage or a small percentage? 0. No, it's
Oh, maybe I misunderstood you.
How
I
about-
think
yeah.
Children, they think they can overcome everything.
yeah. So if we're talking about how many people just think by their nature have a high level of hope and self-confidence that they can overcome things in life. What percentage of people have their brain operate that way? And the answer is about 80% of people. So what we know is that this isn't a strange concept. This isn't hard to do. People innately understand hope, but what they don't innately know how to do is how to fuel it. And we're always fueling hope. Every conversation we have, every coaching session, when we have a problem, we are doing one of two things. We either fixing the meaning somebody gave to an experience, or we are fueling hope so that it will carry over, so that it will triumph over experience. That is every coaching session I have ever had. So we talk about this stuff in the context of prospecting because this is all important stuff. This connection and storytelling is the quality piece of the process. It is what you have to become good at to have prospecting work for you. And I will tell you that if you just master those two things, this is a business that has no limitations. And so many people struggle with it because they do not understand the basics. And at the end of the day, it's really not that complicated. So does anybody have any questions on prospecting? Any place where you really struggle on prospecting? Everybody got it mastered? Yes. What do we do when people won't prospect, when they won't talk to people? I deal with this all the time. I can't get people to fill out a list, but they don't want to go talk to somebody. You guys ever have that problem? What do we do? Why won't people talk to people? And the reason is because they don't have enough belief to do it. They don't have enough belief in the product, they don't have enough belief in the business, or they don't have enough belief in themselves. That at the end of the day, beliefs are really important. They're one of the components that drive hope. See, beliefs are those conclusions we make every day. So as you're sitting here, listening to me talk, I can assure you, every one of you, your brain is focusing on something, and from that focus, you will begin to make conclusions. Might be, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this. It might be, why in the world am I wasting this hour and a half of my day? It could be any one of those things, but I understand whatever that conclusion is will program your brain, and it will begin to dictate every decision and action you make. So I have to pay attention to beliefs. And if somebody's beliefs aren't strong enough, what is the key thing to do? Make the task simpler. So let me tell you how this is important in prospecting. We have realized that goals and activities can be one of the biggest reasons people disengage from this business. If I give people too big of a goal, or I give them too complicated of an activity where they cannot succeed, the likelihood is that I will force a disengagement from the business simply because they are not ready to reach for that goal. And we do this all the time. I cannot tell you how many people I have seen chased out of this business because we set the wrong goals for people and we set the wrong pace. And we're taught in school and we're taught by society that goals are everything. And I will tell you, if you don't listen to anything else I say, goals are not everything. The journey is always more important than the destination. We didn't master destinations. We didn't master goal setting. We mastered the journey. We mastered keeping people engaged. You take somebody like myself, I'm a business guy, and people always say, well, what kind of goals do you have? And they're always surprised by my answer, none. I don't have any goals. I don't use goals. And they're like, how can that be? How can you be successful without goals? And I said, because I live my goal. Every day of my life, I pursue excellence in everything that I do. And every day of my life, I get up looking to serve every aspect of my life. Looking to serve my family, looking to serve my business, looking to serve my community. This is who I am as a person. I don't care what the outcome is. I don't care how much money I make. I don't care who the focus of that is. What I care is that I'm pursuing excellence, and every day I'm looking to serve people. So it is our identity, it is connecting to the journey that really becomes the strength of who we are, not goals. Now, there are some people where goals are critically important. They work really well, and you have to understand who those people are and why they work well, and we can talk a little bit about that. But I will tell you, if you master keeping people connected to the journey and not the destination, you will find this business works very, very well. You know, I learned this lesson the hard way. You know, I was a person that used to push goals to death, and I went, of all things, to a spiritual retreat, not something that I would normally go to. I'm sort of a logic-driven, very pragmatic person, and when somebody goes, I'm going to take you to a spiritual retreat to Fiji to listen to a guru from India who has 250 million followers, I'm not the guy that's usually going to jump on the plane and go. But I thought, you know what? Why not? Why not open my brain? I've never experienced this kind of thinking. Maybe there's something that I'm going to learn. And I will tell you, I went into that event, and a couple cool things that happened at the event, but I went into that event not only just an open mind, but wanting to see if there was something that I could learn, you know, something that could make a difference in my life. And these were really interesting people. You know, they showed up in sheets. They had these certain people that were called altered beings that spent 14 hours getting in an altered state. And like if they were to walk in from that room and sit down, it could take them 30 minutes, and they were blessing people. And this was all sort of weird to me. And we would have these breakout sessions. And they told me something in the breakout session that changed my life. And what they said is this: we study cultures and religions all over the world. We are experts at every religion and every culture that exists. This is what we do. And what we learn from the Western culture is the two greatest sources of suffering. We're obsessing about the future and comparing ourselves to others. And I was like, wow, where were you 20 years ago? I never realized these things, and I never realized how much of that I did. And I will tell you, I see this every day of my life. And I see this and this path of suffering simply because our thinking is wrong. So we get into the prospecting cycle. Nobody's got any questions. What happens after prospecting? We begin to say, well, what are we prospecting for? Either a customer or a team member. You call them franchisee partners over here, correct? So let's take the customer side. If we develop a relationship with a customer, we have two goals with that customer. The first goal should be a pretty simple one: to keep them on the product. And the longer we keep them on the product, the longer we fuel engagement, the better things are going to be. Do you think this is an easy or a hard thing to do, to keep people on the product? What do you think the data tells us? So you get somebody on Juice Plus. Is it easy to keep them on Juice Plus, or is this something that's hard? It's hard. Yeah, why is it hard? Because the product doesn't work? Crazy. You look at the research. You'd think anybody that looked at the research, you'd never have to have another conversation with them. And then we understand that actually this is one of the biggest challenges we have in this business, keeping people on the product. And it has nothing to do with the product, it has to do with people. What we realize is what drives the process of Juice Plus is education, not transformation. See, transformation is something you feel, something you connect to, something you understand on your terms. So if we do not keep educating and reinforcing somebody's decision, then what happens is, in all likelihood, they don't feel Juice Plus, they don't taste Juice Plus, they don't see a difference with Juice Plus, they often don't feel prevention, and therefore they stop taking it. So we have really a couple choices that we can make from a strategic standpoint. One is that we can connect them better up front. We can do a good job at, when they get the product, understand that the product is not about the studies, it's about the transformation of their life. It's about a commitment to changing their behavior and changing their life. The biggest research we use is the Children's Health Foundation research, the Children's Health Study, not the other studies. Because those studies show that Juice Plus does something very critical. It transforms people's lives, it transforms people's behaviors. And this is really, really important to understand. So we do a good job trying to connect people, because if we don't connect people at a high level, then we have to continue to follow up and work so hard. And even then, sometimes the job doesn't get done. And we find that most people, if you look at how we run the business, we set up incentive programs, and I don't know what your incentive program are here. It's like you talk to, in the United States, it's you talk to 5 people and you get 1 distributor, and that's your goal, and you can get an incentive. And once you do that, guess what next month's about? 5 more people and 1 new distributor. And nobody said, well, what about the other 5 that we just got? What do we do about them? And I will tell you that to master relationships, to build a huge business, you have to pay a lot more attention to what happens after the sale than what it takes to get one. So we became very involved in continuing to follow up. We always did customer care. And what we see is that people that do follow up and the people that do customer care have much more success in keeping customers. And there is a time where those people are on long enough where you can't pry the product away from them. But I will tell you, it's about a 10% number. 10% of the people get to that point where you could literally keep them on for year in and year out and never even have a conversation with them. So what do we do with the rest of the people? Well, the number one thing we can do to keep a long-term customer is convert them to being a distributor. And why does that work? Why does that change them staying on the product? And the reason is very simple. When I convert somebody to being a distributor, they take ownership of the education. They take ownership of their own follow-up. See, they're going to the meetings, they're listening to the tapes, they're hearing the doctors. I don't have to send them anything, I don't have to do anything. Because they're building a business, they're in this what we call information loop. And what we know is when they become in the information loop, this is what keeps them on the product. And not only keeps them on the product, but when they stop the business, continues to have them stay on the product. So by far, the most successful strategy you can have with your customers is to try to convert them over to the business. Not necessarily because they're going to become a big leader, if nothing else, so that they take ownership of fueling their own beliefs and that will continue to have them engaged on taking the product. And we have to remember, in our business, 85% of our business are just customers. So it's important to keep this customer base. And I'm trying to share you strategies with doing this. Now, when we get into the business, so now we're in the business side of this, and we now say, well, how does the business work? How do we keep people? Well, the first thing is for us is engagement. You know, the triumph of hope over experience, but with ourselves. You know, we can't be successful if we don't have disciplines, if we don't build routine, if we don't build a good daily method of operation, if we're not doing the paying activities every day. This isn't going to be a business that rewards us very well. And this engagement is really important. And I will tell you the biggest mistake that I see made is people get out of building and get into management. So we never stopped recruiting people. We never stopped getting new customers, and we never will. Doesn't matter how big the business is and how successful. And we see so many leaders that stop this process. They get 1 or 2 or maybe 3, maybe even 5 lines, and they're so involved with the development of those lines. They never really give those people their independence, and at a certain point, they stopped the process of building. So engagement for us is always about building. Every time, if you want to know what building looks like, go look at somebody's 12-month report and look at their personal volume and look at their open volume. And I will tell you, if those 2 things aren't going up, they are not building their business. And it is that simple. And it's the number one challenge you'll have as you become a leader in this business. Now, if we go to the second part, something you mentioned earlier that's so critical is duplication. What's duplication? Keeping other people engaged. It's being able to give experiences and meaning to other people. It's beginning to fuel hope in other people. And the better we get at this, the better we're going to get at keeping people engaged and keeping people involved in the system, keeping people moving up the marketing plan. So duplication is nothing more than the engagement of others, and this being the home of the engagement. And this is the whole key to building a team. And then ultimately we understand that if we're engaged and we can keep other people engaged, then how quickly can we build to this point of independence? How quickly can we build people to a point of success? And this is the picture of how we build this business. So as I look at this picture, and I've explained it to you, where do you think people have the biggest challenge here? Which one of these areas? Prospecting, getting long-term customers, conversion, engagement, duplication, building independent mass, critical mass, independent leadership. What do you think is the biggest challenge they have? Engagement, okay. Engagement's a big one. Not the biggest one in my opinion. Second on my list.
Relationship.
Relationships, but from where? You think the customer relationships? Yeah, relationships are important. I want to talk about relationships in a minute too, because I think it's an important thing to understand. How are we doing for time, by the way? Okay, good. So I believe the most important thing that people struggle at in this business is duplication. What I find is that a lot of people work hard and they don't necessarily produce a lot of results, and they don't get the results they want, and the reason is because they can't get other people to work hard. I see people that work crazy hours and do all these things and they can't get a team, and then I see other people who barely spend any time at all, and their hardest problem is keeping up with the growth of their team. So I will tell you, mastering the engagement of others is really the key to team building. And if you want to master the engagement of others, start with it with yourself. If I were to ask anybody in here, okay, let's talk about hope. How do I fuel hope? That's what the goal is. Tell me how to do it. So it's a simple question. Who can tell me how to fuel hope? Why does hope exist? Where does it come from? If our goal is to engage people and hope is such an important part, how do we do this? And it's interesting because everybody's like, oh, I don't know if I'm afraid to answer the question, or maybe I've never even thought about this question.
Imagination.
Imagination? Okay. Imagination for what?
Visualize yourself in that situation.
Okay. So having a picture, like a vision.
Yeah.
Yes. What we usually talk about when we talk about hope are people's why or their vision. See, we understand hope is a belief about the future. So when we talk about people's hope, we want to understand their why, we want to understand their vision. These are two important things. These are what drive hope. But there's more to this, because if you really break down the understanding of these two things, there are a couple places that these things come from. And the first are people's needs. See, why do people have visions? Why do people have a why? Because at the end of the day, they look at their life and they say, I want something different. I want my health to be different. I want my lifestyle to be different. I want my life to be different. I want to have more fun. I don't know what that transformation is, but I know whatever's driving that vision is something they want different than what they have. And I find so often that the really part of that works are their goals. Are their needs. You know, their need to have success, their need to have significance, their need to have connection with people, their need to grow, their need to contribute. These are the foundations of everybody's why. If I was to take and put a room full of people and I wanted to experiment with this, one of the greatest tools you can do is use something called a vision board. You ever done that with some people? Where you sit down and say, you know what, put pictures of what your why looks like. And I will tell you what you will do if you will do that exercise is you'll begin to see where people are looking to their future and say, this is where I want my life to be different. They'll put a picture of a beautiful vacation, and what they're telling me is, I can't take this vacation because I don't have the money and time to do it, and I don't want to correct these things. They'll put a picture of a kid at a graduation, and what they really say is, what's important to me at the end of the day is for my kids to graduate from a good school, and I want to be able to support that process and have them go to the great school. And they're concerned about these things, and this is the vision they want. And this is important to understand people's needs, because ultimately, wherever hope exists that the need can be fulfilled is where their discipline will flow. So if I have somebody tell me, for instance, you know, the most important thing in my life is my family, guess what my conversations with them about Juice Plus and the business are going to be about? Their family. I'm going to talk about it in the context of how it changes their health. I'm going to talk about, in the context of how it changes their life. Every time I see them getting off where they're having a bad experience, where they're starting to drift, I begin to bring the conversation back to, how does Juice Plus affect your family? Let's get into this conversation again. Because I'm always looking to strengthen their why and connect it to this business and to this product. But there's even something more, by the way, people with strong why-based needs are people that do well with goals, because goals become a picture of their vision. It helps them get order and a process to get there. But there's something that's even more powerful a more powerful way of fueling somebody's why. Does anybody know what that is? A higher purpose. One of the things, there's an area of psychology called positive psychology. They've done a lot of study. It's an interesting guy, a guy by the name of Dr. Seligman. He's a traditional psychologist, said, why are we studying the misery part of the brain when there's a whole other part? And he started building the science around this, and he came to this, started looking at purpose in people's whys, and what he realized is the brain will only stay connected to discipline indefinitely if it is connected to a higher purpose. So what we know is that when what drives you, when your identity is tied to a mission, you become committed and disciplined forever to achieve that mission. So you take the greatest people in life, take somebody like Mother Teresa. Why is Mother Teresa such a beautiful example for people? Why do people talk about Mother Teresa? Was it because she had a big house? Was it because of her car? Was it because of the great business success she had? No, it's because she committed herself to a life of higher purpose. I shared the example with you of Karen Quirk. Karen Quirk will never quit this business because this business isn't about Juice Plus and it isn't about her franchise. It's about who she is as a person and how she is going to use this product and this business to change people's lives. And I will tell you that the more you can connect people to the purpose of this transforming their life, of who they are, to their identity, the stronger their discipline will be, the stronger their why will be. And we use this all the time. And I kind of give you an example. I had I think I might have shared this story. I had a girl that called me at Christmas, and she had the fastest growing business last year. So what year are we in, 2013? I can't remember months or years. It's really moving too fast these days. So she calls me, she had the fastest growing business, and she calls me up, and I figured, oh, this would be great. It'd be great to catch up. I want to know what she's doing because she's doing better than everybody else. And she says, you know what? I wanted to call you because I think I'm going to quit the business. And I was just like floored. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, nobody's doing better than you. What are you talking about? What's going on? And I knew she called me not to tell me that because she really was looking for some help. You know, she had a successful growing business, but she had reached that point where she said, I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I'm really stuck. And we started having these conversations. And what I began to realize was her entire pattern of programming in her mind was that she had a fear of failure. So what she did her entire life was no matter what she did, she became successful. And as soon as she hit that wall where she was overwhelmed and couldn't figure out how to move forward, she quit and started something else to begin the process before. I was like, wow, what do I do with a person like this? So the first thing I had to do was to give her a vision of what it looks like to climb over that wall. I had to explain to her about what was on the other side. I had to give her power to willing to make a transformation and to change. But I used really two questions that made the coaching work. I said, her name is Natalie. I said, Natalie, let me ask you a question. Is this who you are as a person? Are you the kind of person, you seem like such a successful, loving person. Are you the kind of person when things get tough, you just quit and go look for something else? And if you are, how's this impacting your life? So I didn't attack her business. I didn't go after her strategies. I attacked her identity. I attacked the purpose of her life, who she was. And I will tell you, it was that attack that had her change her thinking and give her the courage to climb over that wall and to see that vision on the other side. And she not only came out of the coaching committed to the business, but her business is now even growing faster. So if I didn't understand the power of how to drive hope the right way, I could have had the most successful distributor we had out of the business because of the way her mind was programmed. And it is really just understanding how to drive the hope cycle. So we begin to look at this stuff and we begin to understand that you have to get better at driving hope. You have to practice this. You have to pay attention to this. Your greatest gift in life is failure. I love failing. I love problems because this is where I get growth. This is where I pay attention. So if I'm looking to fuel hope, you know what I want to do? Every time it fails, I look in the mirror and say, why did it fail? Why didn't I earn the job? Where did hope go? What did I say wrong? Because if I pay attention, then I begin to get better at things. As I get better at things, I begin to build strategies and skills, and I begin to create something really important, and it's called value. See, knowledge isn't important. Knowledge and action is important. That's what we need to transform. So we began to look at the business, and this is how we ran things, and we became really good at the engagement principle and driving others to stay involved in this business. And to this day, this is the secret. This is why we created this whole process. Now, if we begin to talk about the transformation process, so I put this a little bit on the back because I know I'm running out of time, but I want to touch on this. I told you that at the core of things, we transform people. You know, that's sort of the business we're in. We transform them, and that's what our business is about. We transform people's health, and we transform their life, their lifestyle, their finances. This is the NSA business. And most people don't even understand what transformation is or how this works. And we understand it's just three simple things, three simple processes. Feed what works, fix what's broken, and protect what's important. Feed what works, fix what's broken, protect what's important. And everything we do in transformation evolves around identifying which one of these things we want to pick to focus on to continue to keep people engaged. So if we find with somebody, for instance, somebody's strength, somebody's good at something, guess what we have them do? Get good at it. Keep doing it. We know that people will always gravitate toward their strengths. And then I see the craziest things. I see people doing the exact opposite. We had a program in the US. This girl came out, and this was the two parts of the program. The first was the way we're going to transform people is we're going to identify their weaknesses and we're going to change them. And I can tell you there is a mound of research as high as this room to tell you how wrong that strategy is. And the second thing was we want to teach people to get 100 no's. That no matter what their experience is, we just want to have them keep suffering until they're okay with the suffering. It's the craziest program in the world. And she had people on it, and she almost destroyed her team because of the way she approached this business. But it's important to identify what works with people. There are things that work really well. And in the transformation process, it's important to understand this. So I'm going to give you another example of how our business just recently got transformed in just a little strategy change. How many of you have heard of Katie Ravely? Yeah, so some of you. So Katie was a young girl, 26 years old, and she became involved with the business, wasn't very successful with our way of talking to people about Juice Plus. Matter of fact, she would tell you if you listen to her webinar that people thought it was too expensive and I really couldn't get people to do it, and I really couldn't get people to stay on it. And then she realized really something really important, that I'm going to change the way I'm doing things. And she did it through Complete. She actually started leading the business with Complete. She started having people go through a little bit of a weight loss transformation. And then from that, she got them into a business meeting and got them into Juice Plus. And that little change changed her business, because what she did is she created a result that mattered to the individual, and then she built on that result. And she fed that program. And what happened to her in 1 year is she went from signing an application to, I pulled her 12-month report right before I left. I probably have it. I have it upstairs. Because I was curious, what's she done in a year? She went from an application to almost 150,000 in pay line volume. She has 13 PB legs, 9 POB legs. She's already in her 5th generation, and she is now at a 50 club. And she did this in a year. And this wasn't a girl who you would have bet on. This was a girl who was an accounting student who worked for her parents in a small business. I always laugh about her story because I always remember saying the hardest part of the job was staying awake. And she hated what she did, and she didn't have a warm market. But she went in, she was innovative, she found something that worked, and then she ran with it. She kept feeding it. And because of that, her business became magical. So what you have to do is do the same thing. You have to find something that works for you. And then when you do it, you have to continue to do it and get better at it. Because when you can do something well, then you can begin to teach other people to do the same thing. And our team does the exact same thing. We look at what's the fastest growing products in this business. What do you think our fastest growing products are? Shape? No, not shape. But it's sort of along those lines. Our two fastest growing products are Complete and the gummies. Why? Why would those be the fastest growing product? The research isn't done on them. Doesn't have anything to do with our research. Matter of fact, if you look at the efficacy, the strength of the gummies, they're about half of what the Juice Plus. Juice Plus is a superior product. Why isn't Juice Plus growing as fast as that? And the reason is really simple. Because people taste Complete. And people taste the gummies. And it is that confirmation in their brain that says, I want more of these. See, they're giving something to people that they measure value on their terms. And it's important to understand that. I will tell you that Jeff walks around with bags of the Chewies and gives them to everybody. And that's how he recruits people. I've never seen him use the education. I've never seen him hand out a brochure on the studies. But I have seen him use those Chewies because he knows when people take them and taste them, and then he gets to say, look, this is fruits and vegetables. This is a great snack. And he gets them started there. They immediately have a result on their terms, and the business begins to build. And then we look at, well, how does that affect the engagement process? And I will tell you that if you look at Complete and you look at the Chewies, people stay on them longer. And the reason is because they taste them and they enjoy them. And when that happens, then the transformation, the conversion to become back to Juice Plus changes. The conversion back to the business changes. See, that's the things that you need to pay attention to, and things you might want to look at your business and say, am I going about this the right way? Do I understand at the end of the day that the transformation of this product and this business is what this is all about? And if I'm not accomplishing this, if people aren't seeing this, I'm not going to be successful at this business. So you have to find something that works and you have to feed it. Now, one of the things I put down here is the one thing you can never get away from in this business is doing the paying activities. You know, when we talk about consistent discipline, we always talk about consistent paying activities. We don't want you to think consistent discipline is playing on like the virtual office all day, or sitting around just listening to an audio all day, or sitting around just writing a name list. If you do that every day, I cannot promise you success in this business. What your disciplines have to involve around are the five things that I put on here. You're always getting new customers. You're always getting new team members. You're always working on customer retention. You're always working on customer conversion. And we're always fueling engagement. If you want to know what we're doing every day, that's it. Those are the things that define our DMO. Those are the things that are the consistent disciplines that we do, the habits that we build. And at the end of the day, the habits are what we're trying to create. If I can create the habits around these things and make people good at them, I can make them successful at anything. Do you think habits are important? What do you think? Do you think they even matter at the end of the day? Yeah. Do you know that almost 40% of your entire life is run by habits and you don't even realize they're going on? Habits are literally the autopilot of our brain. And when we create habits, these are the things that drive the routine of the brain. These are the things that give our brain order. And if we can create the habits of these things going on every day, I don't care whether it's 10 minutes or 10 hours, what I know is this will ultimately be the things that I have to feed and fuel in my business. So the next thing is innovation. I shared the story of Katie, and the last one is personal and leadership development. I mentioned this earlier. If you didn't write it down because it's really important. You grow before your business grows, period. When we built this concept in Europe called the Basel Project, it was all built around this. We understood that at the end of the day, the greatest tool we had for creating engagement was the transformation of people, was personal development. And we learned this by researching a couple companies that mastered this. And the biggest was Amway. You know, we looked at Amway, and I'm not honestly a huge Amway fan. I don't really like their business model. I certainly don't like some aspects of it in particular. They're not really an end consumer model. But how do you not pay attention to a company that does more sales in a year than we've done in 42 years. They must be doing something right. And I looked at it, and I looked at their average distributor, and their average distributor makes 157 US dollars a year. I said, well, how in the world do they keep all these people if they're making $157 a year? Doesn't sound like a great business to me. And meanwhile, their growth last year, just their growth was bigger than every direct selling company in the world's gross sales for the year, but 5 companies. So this is this massive thing that's working really, really well. And then I began to study it a little farther. Actually, I went to some events, and I began to understand that their entire engagement principle, their entire engagement process is built on personal development. They work off a weekly audio tape. They have these great seminars. They sell books. Actually, I went to an event. It was called Free Enterprise Day. I don't know if you ever heard of this. It was put on by one of their distributors. His name was Dexter Yeager. And I think he's the biggest distributor in Amway. And went to this thing, and I didn't know what to expect. I go to, it was at the Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina in the United States. And I walk into the Coliseum, and there are 75,000 people at this event. And this wasn't a company event, this was a distributor event. And I was like, oh my gosh, why are all these people here? And this was back when George Bush I was our president. This is the first time he spoke afterwards. They had General Schwarzkopf, who's one of the most famous military leaders we had. They had Mary Lou Retton, who was one of the most famous gymnasts we ever had. It was like a who's who of lineups, and it was a 3-day event. And everybody I met, I would ask them, so why are you in the business? And how are you doing? You making any money? I never talked to one person that was making any money in the business. Not one. And every one of them had a vision of being up on that stage, had a vision of how this was going to change their life. And every one of them said, I am on the weekly audio tape, and it is changing my life. I am growing every day. I feel like a different person. And it dawned on me that, you know what? That's what they're great at. They're great at selling culture and helping people slowly transform their life, and they're the home for that. So you have to understand that developing people is one of the core foundational things that we do in business. So we have to become good at developing people. We have to be good at helping people grow personally and also helping people grow as leaders. And the stronger we become at this, the stronger we're able to help others. And when we do this, we always want to feed this. And we got into the Basel Project because when we did some research, we found out that about 4 out of 10 people that are involved with NSA are going outside of the company, outside of the leadership, to get their personal development. And we looked at this as a company and said, this is just a travesty. This is something we need to fix. We need to get better at. And this is something that's a huge focus right now because we understand that as a corporation, if we're looking to fuel engagement, the better we become at developing people, the better we're going to be at engaging people and keeping the process work. This is a big focus of the company right now. And it should be a big focus of yours all the time. You should always work on this. Now, what do we fix? What do I see all the time? First up there is leadership style. In my opinion, there are 2 leadership styles: managerial leadership and inspirational leadership. What does managerial leadership look like? Looks like a job. If you've ever had a job and you've ever had a boss that tells you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, what goals the company has, what activities you're going to do, this is managerial leadership. And I will tell you that it works very poorly as a leadership style in a business like this. So they don't have the leverage to fire anybody. I don't get to get their resumes. I don't get to pick who I want. Anybody can join. Anybody can be a member of the team. And the craziest thing is, I would bet 9 out of 10 leaders that I deal with practice leadership style. They literally push people so far that they push them out of the business. They beat them over the head so much with goals and activities that after a while people won't even return their calls. And they wonder why this is a good leadership style. They think that this is the way things are supposed to be. And I will tell you that the leadership style you want to embrace is what I call an inspirational leadership. See, if we can inspire people to chase the goals, if we can inspire people to do the activities, if this is what we become good at, the mechanics of the business don't matter. See, managerial people think mechanics is everything. They think the how-tos and the systems are everything, and we understand that that couldn't be any farther from the truth. If I never taught you one system of NSA, if I never taught you a how-to training on the business, and all I did was inspire you to have this be the home for your future and to be committed to growing here, what I will tell you is you will create the mechanics. You will find a way. So we understand the power of inspiration, and everything we do is to inspire people to do the mechanics. See, the mechanics have already been defined. But if you're not inspired, what you're going to find is you're going to tell people and tell people and tell people, and they simply won't do it. You know, you look at people here all the time, well, you know, I had 10 people come to the meeting and one person showed up. And the reason is because they weren't inspired. They didn't see a value to show up at the meeting. That's why they're not there. You didn't earn their time. So you have to embrace a leadership style that serves this business. You have to learn this engagement principle with hope. Productivity over entitlement, big issue. A lot of people forget, a lot of leaders especially, forget that this is a business that you're always building. See, the transformation of your team never stops. There's not one person on Jeff's team that we don't understand that we can improve their life continuously. Vim Planga, as good as he is, I have conversations about the transformation of the things that he's doing. And I have transformation talks with every one of Jeff's leaders because I know they're always looking to develop. And that helps them be productive. But I will tell you, a lot of people get into a big trap. And that trap's called success. And what happens in this business is they reach a financial plateau where they have enough money to support them using NSA to fulfill their needs in other places. So what we see a lot with leadership is they reach a goal, and then instead of stop being productive, they start being entitlement based. They start thinking they're entitled to keep their team. They keep trying to manage and control things. And this is a very destructive way of thinking. It's a very destructive way of building your business. There is never a time in this business where you don't want to be productive and you don't want to fuel productivity. Entitlement and division are the two greatest cancers in business, and they can't be part of how you operate your business. And if you have this, this is something you have to fix. You know, retention is something that goes back to relationships. Because if we talk about relationships, we have to figure out why they work. So, am I close on time? Okay. So, relationships is about retention. So who can tell me how to build a relationship? Everybody agree it's important? Okay? How many of you honestly have never asked yourself that question? How do I build a relationship? I never had. To be honest with you, the way I found out the importance of this certainly wasn't in school. I don't know if I slept through the class or skipped it or it wasn't part of my curriculum. But nobody told me about relationships. I found out the importance of relationships when I was suffering from a bad one. When I was in a situation where a critical relationship in my life had reached a big enough problem, what we call a gap, where if I didn't fix the gap, the relationship was going to end. And this particular relationship was one of my inner circle relationships. It was my relationship with Jeff. And this was years ago, and I will tell you, our relationship became so problematic that it was going to either get fixed or going to end. And we had I think it was the luxury of having a relationship with Tony Robbins, and Jeff got Tony on a phone to referee where we were at in our relationship. And to be honest with you, I don't remember what the fight was. I do remember that Jeff was wrong. It's always that way, but that's another part of the story. But when we went to solve this problem, what I did was I had my journal out, and I really didn't pay attention to anything except the process that Tony used to deal with a gap in a relationship. Because I figured I could get through it if I understood the process, because I could continue to work the process. And he said things, two things that changed and began my journey to understand relationships. And what he said is that the gap in every relationship in your life will evolve around two questions. The first question is, does this person have my best interest at heart? So good questions to write down. Does this person have my best interest at heart? The second question was, does this person bring something to the table? And I began to look at those two questions. So, best interest at heart, interest at heart, and bring something to the table. I began to look at these two questions, and I said, boy, these must be really important questions, and if I could fix any relationship problem in the world, how cool would it be to understand these questions? And I took I actually started with the second one. Does somebody bring something to the table? And this wasn't hard to figure out. This was what I call the value question. This was somebody questioning whether I had the ability in the relationship to fulfill their needs. See, somebody started not questioning who I am, but whether I had an ability. So they might look at something and say, you know what, at the end of the day, I don't want a business relationship with you because you add nothing to the relationship. And value is important. It's one of the two components of all relationships. Everybody you have a relationship with, you have a relationship because that person can bring value to your life and you can bring value to theirs. And if that doesn't exist, what I will promise you is that the relationship won't exist. Because if you don't bring value to somebody's life, do you know what they do? Go find somebody that will. Kind of makes sense? It's pretty simple. So what I became really good at in my personal development was increasing my value. This was what personal development became about. Increasing my value to the marketplace. In business, everybody comes to me because I have never been given a problem that I cannot solve. I spent my entire life literally learning to transform and fix any business. Don't care what the problem is. And the funny thing was, I did it in a completely different way than every person that studied business. Everybody that I knew in business thought the key to getting better in business was to learn more about business. And I was smart enough to say, you're all wrong. The key to getting better in business was to learn more about people. See, every business in the world is about two things, people and systems. So if I get good at managing and influencing people, and I get good at building systems and correcting systems, I can do anything in any business. And this became my whole journey for 25 years. I literally have spent more time than most PhDs studying human behavior. I understand how needs work, beliefs, habits, how emotions affect the brain. I could sit here and give a course on psychology. And I will tell you, the more you understand people, the more power you're going to have to build any business, and the more power you're going to have magical relationships in any aspect of your life. I would tell you the greatest gift I ever gave myself in my marriage, I've been married for 24 years, was to understand how to become a good husband and a good father. It was committing to the process of that and understanding that. And value is something you always work on. And if somebody's questioning your value, it isn't necessarily because it isn't there. It might be because they don't see it. And this is something that this is actually a very easy thing to fix unless it doesn't exist. Then you have a whole different problem. So this was an easy one for me to get to, and I was always a high value person. So if you look at my life is a series of long-term relationships. I don't come and go with relationships. I have relationships that have lasted decades. You know, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my business partners, my relationship with NSA. This is something that's always been there because I've always been the person that anybody could turn to solve problems and answer questions. You know, I always drove that value. But this was the hard one for me. What does it mean when somebody says they don't have my best interest at heart? This is the first one he brought out. And I was like, man, this must be important. And I began to understand that this was the character question. Character. Did I spell that right? Character. I don't know if I did or not. There's two things I learned about business. You don't have to spell. You don't have to know anything about technology to be good at business. So the character question. So I'll ask you this question. If character is important, what's character? I got that part, I got this far, and I was like, you know, what in the world is character? If I'm going to manage this, if I'm going to understand this, I have to understand what this word is. So I began to ask people everywhere I went out, tell me what character is. So I ask you, tell me what character is.
A value.
A value? Okay. I'm going to flip this over real quick. So who else? Who can tell me what character is?
Somebody who believes in something.
Okay, so believe in something. Okay, what was yours?
A value of life.
A value of life, okay. What else? What's character? Well, I'll give you ask you another question. What's an example of good character? What do people with good character do? Okay, honesty. I hear that all the time. Honesty, integrity. Doing the right thing when people aren't watching.
Radiation, I mean, the good radiation.
The good?
Radiation.
Good radiation, like a good energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the other one.
Personality? Trust?
The way you talk to people.
Way you talk to people, so we'll call that interaction.
Respect.
Respect, I like that. And I kept doing all this same thing too. And then I would take one of them. So I kept getting honesty and integrity. And I said, you know what? Maybe at the end of the day, that's what it's really about. Character is about honesty, integrity. It's because this is what trust is built on. A lot of respect is built on this. Maybe this is the answer. And then I started digging a little deeper. And I started saying, well, if it's the answer, there's not another question that can be answered. So this was my question. Is honesty the same for everybody? So if I were to take Mona as an example, and I'll give you two examples and you tell me if these are the same things. They're both an example of being dishonest. So if Mona had me over at her house and she was helping me, have me help her with her finances, with her family, and with her kids, and then I was able to look at her finances and get the passwords to her computer and look at her bank accounts, and I left her house and I hacked into her computer and I stole every bit of money in her account, everything she had saved for her kids, how do you think she would take that experience? How would you feel if I did that to you? Good character or bad character? Yeah, on a 1 to 10, where would you put that?
0.
Yeah, I mean, this is about as bad as it gets. And then I say, okay, well, let's take another example. Mona and I are out to dinner. She goes to the restroom, and while she's at the restroom, I reach over and grab a French fry off her plate and take it, and I don't tell her. Okay, another dishonest act. How does that feel? Feel the same way? Completely different. So I began to understand that all these things here are not characters, they're measurements of character. And then it dawned on me what character is a measurement of self-interest. And that changed everything. That at the end of the day, what good character looked like was somebody with a servant's heart who was always looking out to serve others, not take from people. And what bad character looked like were people that had such a self-interest that they would intentionally be destructive to people for their own gains. And there was this whole spectrum in between. And so often when people don't have your best interest at heart, what you're doing is making a conclusion that they're putting their needs and the fulfillment of their needs over the fulfillment of yours. And this became critically important because now that I understood character was about self-interest, I could now build models on it. I could begin to look out for things. See, what we look for are people that have these qualities, respect and honesty, and we look for good character traits. We look to build relationships with people that had a high character. Because if we didn't do that, if we didn't pay attention to this, then guess what happens? We inherit people that don't have good character. And let me ask you, has anybody ever been in a relationship with somebody with bad character? If you haven't, you're very lucky. And I see some of you smiling because if I ask you the next question, how did it work out for you? I know the answer, terribly. And it became an exercise of how much pain you could deal with before you just couldn't deal with it anymore. So character matters. So we took this simple thing and we built a model out of it. We realized that the first place we need to start when we're talking about relationships is with ourselves. Greatest tool you have in your life exists in every house that we have. It's called a mirror. And you go look at it and you say, you know what? Let's look at my character. Am I really the type of person who is seeking to gain or seeking to serve? And I will tell you, the greatest transformation I ever made in my life was the transformation of my character. See, I grew up with a very traditional business thinking, that it was the world was mine for the taking. And whoever got destroyed in the process, that's just called good business. And we see that every day. In fact, it's the core problem of everything that exists as a society today, of our problems, is the poor character of leadership. So I began to understand that I had to, as a goal, the first thing is I had to look at my own character and realize that if I don't become the person that defines my life and defines who I am by serving others, I'm always going to struggle in relationships. This is who I have to transform into. And then I took a look and said, you know what? If my goal is serving others, what are my skills? You know, am I good at the things that I need to be good at? Am I good at communication? Am I good at time management? Am I good at systems? Am I good at solving people problems? Am I good at all these things? And if I'm not, then I got to get good at it. I got to understand where I'm at in the process of this. Then I said, okay, so it's good. I know what to work on here. And then the second part became the selection process. Relationship selection. And I will tell you, this is the most important part of the process. One of the reasons we have become hugely successful in business is because we only lock arms with people that fit into the relationship selection criteria we want. We operate with people that have a true desire to serve others, that have a high desire for a different life, that want to transform, that are willing to do the work, that have strong disciplines. We're very clear about what this list needs to look like. And this is a huge problem, and one that we see every day in this business, because what we see for relationship selection in this business is that people will take anybody that will sign an application, and then they wonder why their business suffers. See, we don't lock arms with people that don't have good character and that don't bring value to the relationship. It's not that we get away from them, we manage them in a different way. But relationship selection became everything, and mastering relationship selection. And what we became good at is not only defining this, but also creating an image, becoming the person that when these criteria were there, these people would want a relationship with us. This is one of Jeff's secrets. If you spend time around Jeff, he attracts what he wants. He puts off an image of what he wants. And if you're going to be a leader, then you have to build an image of a leader. You have to operate with success. You have to show a servant's heart. Even if you're not this. I just read an article that Jay Martin wrote. Jay Martin's the founder for the DSA. My lessons of 50 years. You know what his first lesson was? Image is more important than character. Think about that. Image is more important than character. That at the end of the day, the packaging of who you are matters. And this is something that you have to pay attention to, because we want to attract good people. Most of the people we will attract are not people that are inherently independent, that inherently have a strong sense of self-responsibility, that are driven. Most of the people that we attract are codependent people. People that lock arms with people, they become victims, and their whole life is about a story. And I can tell you it's probably 8 out of 10 people that join our business fit that profile. And I can tell you a lot of people get stuck in this part of things. This is something you have to get good at. Now, then we come into the earning stage. So if you think about it, I got 2 people that entered a relationship here. And both of them are looking and saying, you know what, I think this person's character is this, and I think this is going to way they're going to help their life, my life. And then they begin to start the process, and they either come here and say, you know what, I was right, or I was wrong. And relationships start and end right here. This is called earning a relationship. And I will tell you, the littlest things can kick you out of this game. And I'll give you an example. If we had a meeting, so let's suppose Mona and I had a meeting. And I have two different type of people. So I have this meeting, and I show up 10 minutes late for this meeting. Now, depending on who this meeting's with, I have my meeting with Mona, she could be the type of person that says, 10 minutes late? Are you kidding me? You obviously have no respect for my time. You have no respect for anything about me, and this is who you are. And I could have a belief system that said, you know what? Life's about flexibility. You got to go with the flow. 10 minutes, no big deal. And just that one event can literally change the entire journey of my relationship. So I always understand that I'm always paying attention to character markers. I'm always paying attention to value, and I'm always trying to earn my way. And to earn my way, not only have to pay attention, I have to understand it on somebody else's terms. And if I pay attention to this, then I can make any relationship work. And then, of course, to come full circle, we know that the greatest relationships in the world all have gaps. There are times when people begin to question whether they have your best interest at heart and whether you bring something to the table. And these are where we begin to solve relationship problems. Relationship problems. So I share this with you because this is what retention is all about. This is what the game of relationships is all about. This is what we began to master. And all it really was becoming a person that's servants-based, becoming very good at everything we had to be good about, and the third part, so it was character, value, and communication. We became very good at communication. We became very good at connecting to people, how to use communication, how to master the process. We talked about earlier just something as simple as delivery. Who mentioned delivery earlier? We were talking about, somebody said something, because I wrote a note about this. You know that there was a study done about how to influence people through communication, and there were 3 criteria. This was a study done out of UCLA. And there's were the 3 criteria of what matters most in terms of influencing people. Perception, so people's beliefs, delivery, and content. Which one of those 3 do you think was the most important in communication? Content, delivery, or perception? I heard somebody whispering. Yes. So, number 1 on the list was perception. 55%. So I will tell you, with every communication that we have, what we realize at the end of the day, what matters is not the communication, it's what meaning people gave to the communication. If I don't control perceptions, then I'm probably not going to have communication work. And I can give you a good example of this, and where I see a huge problem with this is using information. So if I were to go out there and say, NSA is a 43-year-old company, right? How many of you have ever used this piece of information? Probably everybody. I hear it all the time when I see people give the history lesson of NSA. Have you ever thought about this question? What does that mean to somebody? What does it mean? You know, we look at it, we think, oh, that's a great thing. Do you know that some people look at that and say that means you're old and stale? That means you're gone. We're too late to the game. And what I learn is that I never use any information or data without telling people what it means. Such a critical part of communication. I never use any data. If I talk about a 43-year-old company, you'll hear this tonight when I give my lecture about the business, I'm going to tell people what that means. Because I know at the end of the day, it's not the information that matters, it's the perception. So I'm always telling people what I'm saying means because that's what I'm looking to create at the end of the day. Now, second on the list was delivery. I think it was 38%, which means content is 7%. So if you look at this, understand this is about a 500% difference. We spend our entire time focused on the content of what we say, not understanding that it matters the least in our ability to influence people. That I could literally take a motivated idiot and I would achieve more than somebody that could not motivate and could not deliver a message and had the greatest content in the world. So the power of energy, the power of delivery is critically important in communication. It's critically important in relationships. This is something to understand. I hear people get up and they tell the business story and they spend so much time, even the product story, on content. They have these crazy PowerPoints. You can't even read them all. People are snapping pictures because there's too much. They're up and like, we've had 28 studies on the product. And then other people are like, my God, we have the most unbelievable relationships. And people, if you pay attention, who do they pay attention to? The people that put off the energy. The people where you can feel excitement, where you can feel hope. This is something you have to master every time you talk to people. You have to understand the power of delivery in influencing things. And I see this all the time, so we're almost out of time. So let me see if there's any other ones I want to cover. So I share with you the relationship thing because at the end of the day, relationships are the key to this business. You hit it on the head at the beginning, so we have to master the relationship process. Just to touch on one last piece, and I'm going to touch on this and end on this because this is by far the #1 problem I run into when I'm doing business coaching, when I ask people what they struggle with, and that's time management. So how many people in here have complete mastery of time? Is there anybody that doesn't struggle with time? Because if you don't, I'm going to let you come up and teach everybody why. I've never met anybody in my life. I understand time management, and I still struggle with it because we all live in this crazy world where things are coming at us from 1,000 directions, and it seems to be growing all the time. So when we look at time management, and you study time management, you begin to understand that it is just simply two things: a plan and control. So ultimately, we all have a plan for our life. We have a way to have our needs met. We build these visions and models of things, and this is what dictates ourselves. And what we realize, it's a simple thing, that our plan, that if our model of our life equals reality, what do we call that? Happiness. If this is truly the truth, think about how easy it is to create happiness. All I have to do is change somebody's model to the reality. Now, what happens if their model does not equal reality? That's called unhappiness. And what happens when we have unhappiness and we give up? So if we don't keep hope, then what we end up is suffering. We end up with depression. We end up in a place where we can't grow, where we're stuck. And just so you have a perspective, European data, almost 4 out of 10 people, 38% of every European adult has been diagnosed clinically depressed. So don't think managing the plan doesn't matter. That at the end of the day, having happiness and fulfillment as your goal isn't what it's all about. But more often than not, the plan's not the problem. The problem is control. We live in this world where there's so much pulling at us that we lose control of our own time. And I will tell you that this is something that I fight for every day. First place I look is with my own systems. Do I pick up the phone? Do I look at the text message? Does every time an email come in, do I go and look at it on my computer? Emails were the death of me, and I never figured out why. I used to get, I still do, literally hundreds of emails. And I'd have an email, and I use Outlook. And in Outlook in the US, every time an email came, it would ding. And I was like Pavlov's dog. It would ding, and I'd be like, oh, who was that? And then I found out, I read a study on time management that says every time you're interrupted, it takes 12 minutes to get back on track. And I started doing a little math, and I was like, and I wonder why I can't control my life and fulfill my plan. So you know what I did? I turned the dinger off. And I schedule every communication I have. There are about maybe three people in my life, 3 business people. Of course, my family's an exception where I'm always available to them, but I don't pick up my phone. I don't even hear my phone ring at home. And I've had people that changed their life because they changed the rules about how they schedule communication. Julie Herbst is a good example. She's a 100 Club NMD. I did a time management seminar, and it dawned on her, oh my gosh, I'm available to my team all the time. I let them call me all the time, and they have no boundaries. They call me all night. It's beginning to ruin my family. I said, Julie, it's really simple. Tell people you schedule all your communication, you get back with them in 24 hours, and that when it's their time, you're going to give them everything. And you set up rules. You don't want to have rules and not communicate them. Really important. And she changed that one thing in her life, and that was the year she became 39 Club Member of the Year. One thing. So we have to fight for control. We have to start looking in the mirror. We also have to realize that the greatest problem with control are other people. It's the urgencies that people create. It's being the dependency that exists. And I realized this when I was having everybody, I'm a good problem solver. And guess what people do with problem solvers? They come to you to solve their problems. And you'd be surprised the problems that they want to solve. And what I began to find was most of them were coming to me immediately when they saw a problem. So they get an urgency, and then they try to create urgency for me. And I would react to this. And then I did an exercise. I took 72 hours, and I didn't return any communications that were of that nature. And I found something really interesting out, that all those people that reached to me when I wasn't available went and reached to somebody else. So they were operating in urgency, and when I took away their ability to create urgency for me, the ability to take control of my life, I was able to take control of my time. I always tell people it's an easy thing to understand about relationships when it comes to control, that people in general are either the wind behind your back or an anchor around your neck. And I will tell you, and you can believe me or not, if you identified the 3 biggest anchors around your neck and you took away the ability to control your time, you would completely change what your time looks like. It is never masses of people. It is always a handful that feel like masses of people. So what I always tell people is really understand, get people that become the wind behind your back and get yourself a pair of scissors and start cutting the anchors. And all of a sudden, time control, the control aspect of time management becomes very easy. And this is a simple thing. Always look at control. And what's life about? Your plan. You know, making sure that your model of the world is moving in the direction of reality so that you can have happiness. So on that note, we covered a lot. I hope you got some value out of this. I don't know if you have any questions. If you do, I'll certainly be able to answer them. We went through a lot of things that are really important. And I hope that you certainly apply these things. You know, knowledge without application is wasted time. So if there's one thing you got, I don't care what it was, if you can put it into action and it transforms your life, then that makes this entire experience worthwhile. I can't imagine that there's not a lot of information that you have notes on. Probably the most common thing I hear when I do trainings with people is, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. There was so much I wrote down, I don't know where to start. And I always tell people it's really simple. Take your pages of notes and identify 3 things, write them down, and then circle the one that you're willing to commit to. And then you'll begin to take an experience like this and begin to transform your life from it. So I thank you. Do you have any questions? Guys got it all figured out? It's definitely overwhelming, but understand that it seems overwhelming because I shared a lot of information, but we also are never overwhelmed by it because at the end of the day, it's about simplicity. You know, when I look at time management, people are overwhelmed, but when I break it down into a plan and control 2 things, I can understand this. One of the things I always tell people, I believe the greatest gift God gave me was the gift of stupidity. And I say that sort of in a joking way. My mind cannot deal with chaos. Everything I do, I break down to simplicity. And what I tried to do today was to give you some simplicity of how the business works, some simplicity about engagement, 2 simple words, hope and experience, simplicity about relationships with words like character and value and communication, some simplicity about storytelling, some simplicity about how relationships, some simplicity about time management. If you take these principles and concepts where you get order in your brain, this is where you can begin to build value. This is where you can begin to get good at things. And the hardest thing that I find with people is the more information they get, the more chaos they get, and the more confused they get. And that's when you have to keep breaking things down. You have to get down to those foundational areas because all our success is built on a few simple principles and disciplines. It is not anything more than that. It might seem like more than that because we have so much more that we've built from that, but that's the foundation of it all. So I thank you. I wish you the best. This is my first trip to your country, and I certainly hope I get to come back again and spend more time with you. Tonight I get to share the business story and what NSA is doing, why we're excited about the future. I'm really excited to update everybody. Sitting with the company, sitting with the leadership, boy, there's never been a better time, never been more excitement, and I want you to understand why the company sees that, why they're investing, and get a good picture of that tonight. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks again for spending your day with us. Thank you. Yes.